So friends, it's becoming undeniable that Donald Trump is virtually on the eve of being criminally indicted. And once he's indicted in one jurisdiction, other jurisdictions will quickly follow. Let's talk about why that is. Because justice matters. Hey all, Glenn Kirshner here. So friends, if the criminal investigations of Donald Trump were an action-adventure movie, we would now be in the car chase scene careening toward the climax. You know, given that both District Attorney Fani Willis's criminal investigation of Donald Trump and District Attorney Alvin Bragg's criminal investigation of Donald Trump are nearing the end stages, discussion has turned to which jurisdiction will be the first to indict Donald Trump. In recent days, we've seen headlines like, Stormy Daniels meets with prosecutors as Trump inquiry nears end. And this from one of the grand jurors who sat for 8 months listening to evidence about the crimes of Donald Trump and his criminal associate. That grand juror said regarding what's about to come out, it's gonna be massive, it's gonna be massive. So now, friends, perhaps understandably, part of the discussion has turned to the question of which jurisdiction will be the first one to indict Donald Trump. Will it be New York? Will it be Georgia? Will it be District Attorney Alvin Bragg? Will it be District Attorney Fani Willis? Who will be the first to indict, for the first time in our nation's history, a former president of the United States? We don't know the answer to that question, but here's why it really doesn't matter, friends. Regardless of who goes first, I can all but promise you other indictments will quickly follow. So friends, let's talk about why that is. And I'm going to use my own personal experience as a prosecutor in Washington, D.C. to illustrate the point. There were times when I would be investigating somebody as kind of the target of my grand jury's investigation because I knew that person committed crimes in Washington, D.C. But that same defendant may have also committed crimes up in Maryland or across the river in Virginia. So you have multiple prosecutors investigating the same defendant. There are a number of issues that come into play when you have multiple prosecutors investigating the same defendant. First of all, prosecutors are not monolithic, but we are generally a fairly competitive bunch. Sometimes there is an urge to want to be the first one to prosecute somebody if you know other jurisdictions are also looking at that person. But there's actually sort of an opposite phenomenon that is often at play. You may be looking at your case, and you may think your case is not necessarily as strong as the case being investigated by one of those other prosecutors in Maryland, in Virginia. So maybe you are hoping and expecting that one of those other prosecutors will be the first one to bring charges. Now, I would like to think, and it was certainly my practice, to coordinate, fully and often and openly with my fellow prosecutors around the DMV region to take the most sort of thoughtful, overarching approach to somebody who may have been out there committing crimes in my jurisdictional backyard, up in Maryland, out in Virginia. But prosecutors don't always necessarily coordinate with one another. But often you might wait for another jurisdiction to be the first one to prosecute somebody. Why? Well, it may be that if you feel like your case isn't especially strong, once the defendant is indicted, is being prosecuted in another jurisdiction, it sort of gives you a little bit of a safety net. And then you can bring a case that maybe isn't the world's strongest case because you feel like, okay, I can work my case, I can indict the defendant, and I can sort of be secure knowing that in the event mine doesn't work out, he's already indicted in Maryland or Virginia. Now, friends, let's talk about how those dynamics might play out when the person who's out there committing crimes in multiple jurisdictions is a former president of the United States. In our nation's history, a president has never been criminally indicted, never been prosecuted. So I have said all along, no prosecutor wants to be the first to indict a former president of the United States. There should be a footnote to that assertion because I certainly would be willing to be the first prosecutor to indict a former president of the United States if he committed crimes in violation of the laws of the United States. But having retired from the Department of Justice a few years back, obviously I'm in no position to be that first prosecutor, but I fully understand the feeling that, if I'm the first prosecutor ever to indict a former president, I am going to suffer the white-hot glare of the attention of media from around the world. I am perhaps going to put my prosecution team in danger. I mean, just look at how Donald Trump inspires and incites his supporters to violence. Listen, on January 6th, when he wanted his supporters to stop the certification of Joe Biden's win, he urged them to come to D.C., we'll be wild. He urged them to march on the Capitol. He told them you have to fight like hell or you won't have a country anymore. Then he deployed them, ordering them to stop the steal, stop the certification. So might we expect that when that first prosecutor issues the first indictment charging Donald Trump with crimes, his first post on his third-rate social media platform might look something like, "Come to New York for my arraignment, will be wild. Come to Atlanta for my arraignment, will be wild." Let's hope not, but given what we've come to know about Donald Trump's recklessness, so it doesn't surprise me that no prosecutor is perhaps dying to be the first to indict a former president of the United States. But somebody is going to take that maiden legal voyage, and it looks like it really is imminent. Will it be New York? Will it be Georgia? Could it be the feds? Less likely, I believe. But here's the thing. Once the first prosecutor does it, I predict every other prosecutor who knows Donald Trump has committed crimes in his or her jurisdiction, figuratively speaking, in his or her backyard, every prosecutor will want to be in the prosecuting Donald Trump business. Why? First of all, prosecutors are competitive. Not that it's competition with other prosecutors that should drive or do drive our prosecutorial decisions. They don't, but prosecutors are human beings, the vast majority of them. And there is a certain competitive nature of being in the business of holding folk accountable for their crimes, vindicating the rights of victims, protecting the community. And most prosecutors ought to also have a healthy dose of wanting to protect the rights of the defendant, because that's the only way the system works. But there is a certain sense of competition. But even more importantly, many prosecutors are elected to office. What does that mean? Well, that means they want to run for re-election. They want to get re-elected, and in order to do that, they have to serve their constituents well and faithfully, right? They have to win the trust of the voters in their jurisdiction. They have to do the kind of job that will inspire the voters to re-elect them. So when it comes to District Attorney Alvin Bragg and District Attorney Fani Willis, you can't divorce their work from the fact that they are elected officials who may very well want to run for re-election. Hopefully they don't let that overshadow the nature of their work, but it's a consideration. So you can bet when one prosecutor jumps out and indicts Donald Trump, other prosecutors who are elected officials and may want to run for re-election will naturally say to themselves, I have the goods on Trump too. He committed crimes in my jurisdictional backyard. You know, he victimized the people in my jurisdiction, so I'm going to need to bring charges too. Now, some might say, but that doesn't really apply to the feds, right? Because federal prosecutors aren't elected. True enough, we aren't elected. We're hired. I was hired by my first U.S. attorney, Eric Holder, who gave me a shot, and I will always stand on his shoulders, gave me a shot at being a federal prosecutor. He took a chance on a gutter kid from Jersey. I would like to think he believes it paid off. But we're not elected, so we're not directly responsible to the voters, but we are part of an organization that is in place. The Department of Justice is in place to, in a very real sense, represent the interests of the American people in criminal prosecutions. It's not an attorney-client kind of representation, but when I stood up in court every day and said, "Good morning, Your Honor, Glenn Kirshner for the United States," I was representing the interests of the people of the United States. So I felt pressure to get it right, to do it honorably and aggressively in an appropriate way, to vindicate the rights of victims, to bring charges in a timely manner, to protect the community. I felt pressure to do all that. And even though federal prosecutors aren't elected officials, let's face it, our ultimate boss, the Attorney General, is, in a sense, hired by the president and can be fired by the president. So, yeah, the federal prosecutors are sort of responsible not only to the American people, but ultimately to the Attorney General, who's responsible to the President of the United States. So, yes, there are these dynamics at play where when one indictment is brought, other indictments are almost sure to follow, and to follow pretty quickly. But friends, regardless of which jurisdiction is the first to indict, and regardless of how quickly subsequent indictments come, once a president of the United States is indicted, it will be a new day in America. Why do I say that? Well, once a former president is indicted for his crimes, no president in the future will be able to rest easy in the belief that he or she can commit crimes with impunity. And let's end with this. President Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon for his crimes against the United States, for his crimes against we the people. And Gerald Ford said he was doing it to heal the nation. You know what? In my 30 years as a prosecutor, I never once said to a victim, you know what I'm going to do? You know how I'm going to help you heal? I'm going to decline to prosecute the person who attacked you, who assaulted you, who stole from you, who victimized you. I'm going to help you heal by declining to prosecute your perpetrator. That is a cruel joke. That is a perversion of justice. And it looks like it's about to end with the indictment, for the first time in our nation's history, of a criminal president. It will be a new day. Because justice matters. Friends, as always, please stay safe, please stay tuned, and I look forward to talking with you all again soon.